Hey guys, it's Casey and welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another Friday fun day in my life. The one day of the week, every week, in which I do not have to be a doctor in a shitty little hospital on the edge of the Australian outback against my will under treaty conditions. Though, if I'm to be honest, sometimes I wish that I just worked 7 days a week instead of working 6 days a week. Because when I have Fridays off, a lot of the times, which is why I film these videos, I just sit around thinking about things and stuff that I really have no business thinking about and stuff that I have no business reminiscing about. And so it really is a waste of time. And so I think just powering through would probably be more beneficial than wallowing. Yikes. Sorry to be such a Debbie Downer straight out the gate like that. I know, this video is not even a minute in yet, and I'm already tits deep in the doom and gloom, which I'm sure that my psychiatrist would have something to say about that if he was still alive, but thankfully he is not. I promise this video is not going to be all death, doom, and gloom. In fact, most of the time my life out here is pretty boring, and on the odd occasion it can actually be pretty cool. For example, coming home from running my weekly errands this afternoon, I stumbled across this funky little setup on my bench, courtesy of my best friend, Nate. Not because Nate's love language is giving gifts, because it isn't. Nate is essentially bilingual when it comes to love languages. He does all the love languages. He just loves love. But this is just the kind of thing that he does when he feels like I have been miserable for the last week, which is actually a significant improvement on the last time he thought that I was miserable for a week, because at that point in time he brought me a miniature schnauzer puppy, which was not productive. It just made me even more miserable because I live in a flat that doesn't have a backyard. I think that just buying this instead of buying me a living creature is character development. But anyway, the plan was, I've changed the plan, but the plan was that he was going to come down and we were going to read our respective books. We were going to eat the dinner that he made me, because he actually cooked dinner tonight, pre-cooked dinner, and it's sitting in my fridge right now, which is very, again, generous of him. But then again, not really, because I've spent the last 5.5 years cooking for us multiple times a week. So now that he is in his Gordon Ramsay era, I'm not complaining. But he was going to come down and we were going to read our respective books. That was going to be our Friday night. However, I was like, okay, I see the point. You've gotten me 2 books. Are you going to read one? He's like, no, I'm going to read the Liza Minnelli memoir, the new one. I was like, what do you mean you're going to read the Liza Minnelli memoir? You can't read celebrity memoirs like that. You need to listen to them, because I am willing to bet my left ovary that she is narrating that book, and that's just going to add to the experience. You can't read it. So now, instead of a reading party in which we sit next to each other and read tandemly with one another, we are instead going to be having a Liza Minnelli memoir listening party in which we listen to Liza Minnelli narrate her life story for us in hopes of pulling me out of my miserable mood. And I have been in a miserable mood for the last week. That is very, very true. Over the last week, really, the last week and a half, to be truthful. But I have got a very good reason to have been in a miserable mood. So basically what happened is that I spent the entirety of last Friday going through all the documents in the box that Dress Levesque gave me last year in exchange for one of my daughter's dresses, which I know, it is not the most productive use of my time for exactly this reason, and I should really stop doing it. I won't stop doing it. I'll do it again, but I should stop doing it. And while I was going through all those documents, I found one of my best friend's journals from '89. And because he kept a journal, because he's a dork. I don't know why Dress Levesque had his journal from '89, probably as blackmail material, most likely. But he had it. Then to make matters worse, and I read my best friend's journal as well, which is something that I probably shouldn't have done, but whatever, Dress Levesque. He threw the first stone, okay? It wasn't just me. But through his journals, I got a pretty good idea of where we were day to day over the course of this year that the journal covered, not 2026, but 89. I got a pretty good idea of where we were day to day, what we were doing. And some of it was nice and some of it was not so nice, because my best friend is a nasty little git. He is the politest person who has ever walked the face of the planet, but politeness and niceness are not the same thing, and he is not a very nice person. He was not a nice person then, and he's even less of a nice person now, but he liked to complain about me a lot in his journals, and I can't really begrudge him for that. I would complain about me too, but he particularly liked to complain about me, which again is completely understandable because we were like sister wives, okay? We were sister wives, full on FLDS style sister wives. So that was not his dream life, but in my defense, he was the architect of that particular design, all right? So any dissatisfaction that he had with that, he has no one to blame but himself. But on the flip side to that, I am not the easiest person in the world to live with. I am not now, and I certainly was not then. And so I do not begrudge him complaining about me incessantly in his journal. Fair enough, as far as I'm concerned. Point is, through his journals, having read them over the last weekend, the last week and a half, I have been able to piece together a pretty clear image of what my life was like back then, who I was, what I was doing in day-to-day life, what I was eating, what I was wearing, what made me me, what my daily routine was like from day to day. Because I don't have the greatest memory of this, because I'm disassociated the majority of the time. I've blocked a lot of this kind of stuff out, so it was good for me to read through these kind of things, right? For example, I say on here pretty much every single time without failure whenever I mention my daughter that I was not a good mother. And that is true because, like Sophie and Sophie's Choice, because of certain decisions that I had to make and I had no choice in making, anything that happened pre that or post that is just completely disregarded in the aftermath. And that's fine. I take zero issue with that. I take full ownership of that, in fact, because I say that I was not a very good mother every time I film a video. But if I'm allowed to toot my own horn for a moment, having read myself through my best friend's eyes in his journals, I have come to the conclusion that, objectively speaking, I had some pretty damn good parenting skills. Not that those skills really matter so much now, because they're a bit redundant on account of I most likely will never have another child, but being able to view myself how he viewed me at that point in time, given that he was one of my biggest critics. In fact, I would go as far to say my second biggest critic in life ever, second only to my mother. It was nice to get that acknowledgement from him, even if it was in words that I was never intended to read. Because I had his journals and I was such a prominent character in his journals back then, I was able to piece together exactly what I did from day to day. And I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. I'm going to spend an entire day living authentically to how I lived back then. And I'm going to follow my exact daily routine down to the minute. And I can make a whole entire vlog out of this. This is going to be so much fun. How hard can it be? It was hard. You wouldn't expect it to be that hard because all I really had to do was follow A, B, and C and we're in the home clearing. But no, it wasn't that simple. It was very, very hard. I was so excited. I spent all of Saturday prepping for this. I even made tea, and I don't mean I put tea in a teacup and poured hot water over it. No, I drove 2 hours down the road to a farm that looked like the house from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I expected that I was going to be cut up and eaten in tiny little pieces in order to individually make a tea mix that would be authentic to the time period. That's how far I went. I put dried fruit into a jar. I layered it into the jar, as you can see, for when guests come to visit, like I'm still living in a 50+ room mansion in the mountains instead of some shitty little flat that's infested with lizards. And I knitted. Do you know how much I hate needlework? Here's a clue. It's a lot. I hate it a lot. So I put in all this time, I put in all this effort, and then Sunday morning rolls around. And from the moment I wake up, The moment my head leaves the pillow, it immediately goes off the rails. I don't even know what I was doing to make it go off the rails so quickly, but it was gone. The train was off the tracks. And so I felt incredibly dejected by that, and I did the only thing that I could do in those circumstances, which is I went and I called Dress-Levesque. Now, people ask me all the time, if Dress-Levesque is my worst enemy, why do I still insist on talking to him so much? And the answer to that is, it's very complicated, okay? It is a very complicated relationship. Yes, Dress-Levesque is a literal psychopath. Yes, Dress-Levesque once stabbed me in the eye. And yes, Dress-Levesque once one of my 19-year-old co-workers for seemingly no reason whatsoever, at least at the time. The reason has since become apparent, but at the time he didn't feel the need to stop and explain anything. So yes, he is my worst enemy for those reasons plus many, many more. However, in saying that, he is also the one person here that I can talk to about these kind of things without having to contextualize everything that I'm saying. And secondly, you're probably not aware of this, and it's probably not the greatest thing to be sharing around for show and tell, but psychopaths are incredibly good people to bounce these kind of issues off, any issues that you have, because they have no ego. They have no skin in the game, and they are not going to sugarcoat anything that you need to hear. They're going to tell you exactly what you need to hear, exactly how you need to hear it, with no in between. And so if you ever want brutal honesty or brutal truth about something, you need to go to your local psychopath. Except for this one time when I needed him to understand where I was coming from, he was not getting it, okay? He was not getting the memo. So I've gone to this literal psychopath and I've poured out my heart, and he's turned around and he's just gone,
well, you're just having a huge tantrum because you're used to having everyone wait on you hand and foot, and where you live now doesn't have a morning room, and you are displeased about that, and that is ridiculous. Where you live now still has fresh fruit and florals and vegetables, so if you want to eat as you would eat at home, you are perfectly capable of doing that. You just have to cook it for yourself. And I don't understand what the problem is with that, because you are not a bad cook.
I was like, you're absolutely right. You do not understand what the problem is here, because that is not the problem. It's not the house that's the problem. I have no problem living here. In fact, I quite like living in this smaller environment where everything is in arm's reach at any given time, because I'm lazy and I enjoy that. It's not the food, it's not the cosmetics. I can make food and cosmetics if that's what I want. That's not the issue, okay? It's me. Hi, I'm the problem, it's me. I cannot find the motivation to do anything. Even when I set myself up to win, as I did on Sunday, I still can't find the energy to get over that hurdle and actually do it, because I have been stuck in a functional freeze forever. All three of us have been in a functional freeze forever. Me, Ilya, actually, I don't know if functional freeze is necessarily the right word to describe because I don't even want to imagine what it's like being inside his head. I mean, technically speaking, I'm literally inside his head right now. We all are. But to be him inside his head is a hell I don't even want to imagine, because the human body was never designed to carry that much energy all at once. And I work from the assumption when dealing with him that he has had a chronic headache since conception, that he knows no other way of being, which certainly I can't imagine does anything good for mental health or health in general, but I'm going off topic here. This is not the topic for today. Point is that we are in a permanent functional freeze at this point. We don't change. We don't change physically, we don't change mentally, and we certainly don't change spiritually. Life happens around us. We are not active participants in it. Yes, the environment that we are in changes against our will, and we will respond to that change in environment. But internally, we are like travelers who are perpetually stuck at an airport awaiting a delayed plane, right? We exist only in a liminal space in between. Liminal core, that's my name. And then, because my brain never turns off, that then led me to think about 2026 and the so-called epidemic of people having mental health issues. Because we went through what was objectively some of the worst traumas in all of human history, but we couldn't afford to have a breakdown about it. There was no breakdown to be had. And in saying that, all three of us had pre-existing mental health issues before anything happened. Like, even to begin with. But did that matter? No, that didn't matter at all, because we had no choice. We had to get up and push through it, because what else was there? There was no safety net. There was no in-between. There was no mental health service coming to rescue you. You either got up and moved on, or you literally laid down and died, because help was not coming. There was no help to be had. If you didn't get up and go get your food, go get your water, prevent yourself from freezing to death, then the natural consequence was the natural consequence. And you can put two and two together to what that is. And that thought led to another thought, that led to another thought, that led to a question. And that question is a population in the midst of a mental health pandemic symptomatic of a healthy society? And if so, does that mean that having a mental breakdown is both a privilege and a choice, consciously or subconsciously? Which is in no way intended to be a criticism, it's just an observation. It's like similar to when someone claims to have PTSD over something totally seemingly benign, which admittedly is something that I find incredibly annoying here in the modern West, and it always makes me want to roll my eyes. But whenever I have that urge, I try to keep in mind that nervous system collaboration is dependent on personal experience. So if someone has only ever lived in low threat environments before, seeing an event like, I don't know, someone walking onto the tracks in front of a moving train is legitimately going to be a life-altering event. Where for someone like me, who has spent prolonged periods of time in high threat environments, such an event is, as callous as it sounds, it's something that I, in all likelihood, am going to forget in about 15 minutes. So basically, as a problem, whether it be something like violence or poverty becomes rarer, society's sensitivity to the remaining incidences increases. So essentially, humans are victims of their own success. By making the world significantly safer, you have decreased your collective tolerance towards distress. It's more or less a paradox at this point. And I think it's the same kind of concept when it comes to mental health pandemics, in that having a mental breakdown is a biological luxury that requires a baseline safety net. Whereas in extreme survival environments like the one that we were stuck in, the brain enters a state of functional amnesia, where it suppresses emotional processing to prioritize physical staying power. And personally, I think that's pretty cool. Your focus on mental health is a sign that as a society, you have moved away from one that merely survives to one that has a safety net to notice what's going on beneath the surface. And I, for one, as I said, think that's rad.
Your brain fast in our home. She wouldn't say, "You can't do that." She wouldn't say it directly.